Hi, I'm Random Rob. Welcome back to the new show. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Blue Byte's 2015 science fiction city building game, Anno 2205, and tell you 5 things you need to know about it. But first, a little background. The Anno series began in 1998 with Max Design's Anno 1602, Creation of a New World. Gameplay was based around city building, exploration, and diplomacy and trading with other cultures, and naval combat. The next 3 versions of the game would follow this formula of historical trading simulations, with programming being taken over by Related Designs and Blue Byte. In 2011, Blue Byte released Anno 2070, the first futuristic game in the series. The game had a troubled launch, although it was hailed for its realism in dealing with a post-global warming world. It also got severe criticism from new players and fans for its always-online DRM, which caused, among other things, frequent crashes and causing players to lose their game saves. And Anno 2070 would not be the last game to face backlash about always online DRM. In 2015, Blue Byte put out Anno 2205, a much more streamlined game than the previous entry, where the main focus would be building a thriving lunar colony in advance of the next wave of expansion into the solar system. So here are my 5 things to know about Anno 2205. Number 1. This is still a climate crisis future. Although Anno 2205 takes place in a future where mankind has finally realized clean technologies, the implications of climate change can still be seen. Colonizing the Arctic regions requires atmospheric processors to keep ambient temperatures low because of atmospheric overheating. Another telltale sign is that fishing now only occurs in the Arctic regions, and the temperate regions have clearly moved north of the equator. In the tundra expansion, we can see that the permafrost has receded and that these regions have now turned into swamps that need to be drained in order to be viable for housing and industry. Number 2, supply chains are everything. Supply chains are the main focus of Anno 2205 and will provide a constant challenge to those who enjoy this kind of city building experience. Supply chains are also necessary to attract the different kind of populations you will need to create the further technologies you need to develop. For example, when you start building in the temperate regions, you will start with basic workers, and you'll be tasked with providing water, rice plantations, as well as mining common metals for construction. Once your basics are taken care of, you want to start attracting professionals. When you have a sufficient professional population, you will be able to research more advanced technologies, but you will also be required to produce more specific luxury items to keep them happy. You'll have to build infodromes, for example, to increase access to the internet. And ultimately, you will want to attract a population of investors in order to produce the more exotic technologies. And similarly, they also require a higher standard of luxury items. Expansion in the polar regions is more of a balancing act, where you have to carefully add small numbers of scientists and slowly improve technological expansion to maintain the area's delicate ecosystem. And again, when you establish your lunar colony, where the balance comes from providing enough workers and industries to keep a lunar colony going without breaking your budget. Because once you start sending people to the moon, the costs get very expensive. The real challenge is that once you have established all these supply lines connecting the temperate regions and the Arctic and the moon together, every further population expansion you create will cause a disruption of multiple supply lines which are all tied together. And you have the problem where a shortage of one key resource can disrupt up to about a half a dozen other resources or technologies. and you will very often be required to reorganize your cities, optimize transportation and distribution, and balance your power grid. Once you start to produce helium-3 on the moon, then you'll have the option to send broadcast power back to Earth. Then the goal is to raise your population of civilians to 1 million, essentially requiring you to optimize every inch of space on every map you're using. For the record, I'm 100 hours into the game and I am still working on that goal. Number 3, it's relaxing and pretty to look at, or what I like to call the screensaver factor. Even on lower graphics settings, Anno 2205 has a really handsome design aesthetic. From the mirrored surfaces of the corporate towers in the temperate regions, to the humble tent communities in the Arctic and tundra regions, to the rugged industrial structures on the surface of the moon. All of it has a clean, efficient, modular look that's very futuristic and believable. Not so much for the in-game characters, though, who still look like creepy robots. Number 4. The game borrows from Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, opposing the efforts of your multinational consortium and the handful of other consortiums who are economic opponents is the Orbital Watch, lunar colonists who, like the penal colony in the Heinlein book, have rejected control of Earth and are waging a war to keep the moon for themselves. Now, ostensibly, the reason to have this opposition group is so that Anno 2205 can continue the tradition of having naval-based combat, which brings me to number 5. The naval combat in this game makes no sense at all. So, you're supposed to represent a multinational consortium among a handful of others who are producing exotic goods and technologies in order to further lunar colonization. At the same time, you have lunar colonists who want their freedom, who are fighting a war against your encroachment in their territory. But none of these battles take place on the moon. Instead, the Orbital Watch somehow sends fleets of ships back to Earth to hinder terrestrial development. Just logistically and economically, it makes absolutely no sense. Especially when you consider that as the player you were constantly dispatching fleets of Orbital Watch ships, and yet they somehow have the money and resources to keep sending more navies down to Earth. I can understand why they included naval combat so that the game would have continuity with the rest of the series, but it really makes no sense at all. Now, the game doesn't always require you to engage in these combats, but certain key technologies can only be developed by getting hold of iridium, which cannot be mined in the game. You can only get it as a reward for either completing side missions, which you can perform with your flagship on Earth, or engaging in fleet combat. I should mention the fleet combats are fun. They go very quickly. You have to carefully use special abilities in order to succeed. But I do think that they are one part of this game that was completely unnecessary, and had they left it out, would have given the developers more time to add other more interesting elements. So overall, would I recommend Anno 2205? Yes, if you're a sci-fi geek and are drawn to a city builder type game where each city you build has wildly different variables that you have to meet in order to successfully expand. So what are your favorite science fiction based building and construction games? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you heard, hit the like button and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron of the new show. I could use your help. Alright, this is Random Rob for the new show, signing off. I'll see you next time. The new show is made possible by generous support from viewers like Tony, Luz, Arnell, Skipnik, Christopher, Marian, Eric, and B. Thank you so much for your support.